Hey folks, we're on famous Lake of the Woods in Ontario, catching oh, there's a nice walleye right there. How about that, huh? Nice way to start the show. There we go. Hey folks, look at that, huh? That's a nice Lake of the Woods walleye. How about that, folks, huh? Nice walleye. Like I said, we're on Lake of the Woods, fishing walleyes up in the Miles Bay area. Nice fish, huh? Let's measure that one. See, it's probably about almost 18 inches. We can have a couple walleyes we can keep on our conservation license here. A conservation license lets you keep 2 fish per day while you're fishing on Lake of the Woods in Ontario. So that's all you can have, and it doesn't matter if it's a walleye, a northern pike, perch, a rock bass, 2 fish, that's all. It'll sell for about $18 per American dollar. Now, if you decide you want to camp out there on one of those rocky islands, that'll cost you $10 per day to camp on a rock. But many people think heading to Lake of the Woods that you have to make a weekend of, but not so. My camera girl, Raina Benson, and myself left early this morning at about 4:30 in the morning. We were fishing by 9:30 or so, and that included stopping in Baudette for a nice breakfast there. Then you cross the border, go through customs, and 30 miles out of Baudette, we're out there fishing in the Miles Bay area. Now, folks, here's the deal. There are many places that you can fish on Lake of the Woods. Parts of Lake of the Woods are huge, with like you're on an ocean. Other parts, like where we're fishing here in the Miles Bay area, it's called the Islands area. Many islands, and you really need to be careful and know where you're going. I can't tell you how important it is, if you've never been there before, to have a good compass with you or a GPS unit and mark where you leave the boat landing, because it's easy to get lost. These islands, they all look alike, and pretty soon one island after another, and you're not sure where you're at. So it's very important on this big body of water. Cell phones, for the most part, will not work for you out there. So if you get lost or you run out of gas, you're going to be out of luck. So make sure you got plenty of gas in your boat also. Now, the water this year was down about 5 or 6 feet. So there's lots and lots of big boulders, rock piles that are sticking way up out of the water, but also there's some that are just barely protruding upward. So you really got to watch the buoy system out there. And if you pick yourself up a good map, that'll show some of the buoys, but you'll see them out there. Just have your flasher or your graph on there, and you'll come over and go over on top and on the sides of all kinds of reefs, rocky islands, any place. When you're out there fishing and that water comes up, it's worth to back up, throw out a buoy, and then fish it. You might not mark fish, but a lot of times they're hanging right close to the bottom. And what we're doing today, all we're doing is pitching out small, lightweight, Lindy fuzzy grub type jigs. Now we're using an 1/8 ounce jig today. Now expect to lose a fair number of jigs when you come up here. You want to use the lightest jig you can possibly use. Today, again, I've got an 1/8 ounce jig. There's sometimes when I'll actually go, if they're sitting right up on top of the rocks, where you get the most of the boulders and rocks up there, then I'll actually go down to like a 1/16 ounce fuzzy grub. And you can't feel it. You won't be able to feel that lure on the bottom, but by going to the lighter jig, you're still going to be down there on the bottom, and to know that you're down there, you're just going to have to look at your line when it goes slack. But you're going to get caught up in those rocks a lot less than if you go to, say, like a 1/4 ounce jig or bigger. Now, if you get into deeper water, obviously, you're going to have to go. I'm marking a few fish down here. And you'll actually mark fish. Sometimes it's hard to tell between a boulder or a rock that's sticking up and a fish, but if you know your electronics, you'll be able to tell the difference. And most of the time, the fish are a little bit up off the bottom. And what you can do, like today, it's such a calm day out here with no wind, you can get out from these rock piles, and most of the time, this time of the year, those fish, at least during midday, aren't going to be right up on top of the rocks, but they'll be off to the side in a little bit deeper water. So what you can do, you can just move off to the side and just pitch those jigs in and then just work them back to the boat. Or like I've also been doing today, using my electric trolling motor and moving around a little bit.
Obviously, I'd like to have a little bit of a wind, but you got to go with what you have. And so we're basically just pitching out those jigs, letting them fall to the bottom. You can't really feel them on these real light jigs. See slack line, and then just slowly work that jig. Pop it, work it back to the boat. And sometimes these fish today have been slamming it pretty good. Other times you just feel a little bit of heaviness. And other times, which I've done numerous occasions today, I think it's a fish, and I give it a good hard hook set, and I hook her right into a big rock or a big boulder down there. So bring plenty of jigs with you, multicolors, small jigs down to 1/16 ounce, and also bring some up to 3/8 ounce jigs if you have to get out there in that real deep water where some of those fish are going to be hanging, especially when you get out there in the big part of the open water. A lot of those fish are down in that 30, 40, even 50-foot range. So to get down there, obviously, you're going to have to go with a bigger jig. We'll be back with more of the fishing scene after this.
Our conditions today here on the big lake, Lake of the Woods, are wind, none. Nothing at all. Totally calm, which you won't find very often here on the big waters. Water temperature 77 degrees, air temperature in the mid-80s, and water clarity not very good at all. There's actually a pretty good late summer algae bloom going on right now. Plus, Lake of the Woods has kind of got a copper color to it anyhow, so water clarity not good.
Lake of the Woods offers a wide variety of fishing like walleyes, of course, big jumbo perch, sauger, which are a cousin of the walleyes, and of course, world-class muskie fishing. And don't forget about the ever-elusive, but every once in a while you'll catch them, the all-famous rock bass. Lake of the Woods has it all, and folks, it really is a great time up here on this big body of water. And it's pretty simple what we're using today. Again, we're using just small jigs because of all the rocks down there, and we're hooking on with a leech right through the sucker, pitching it out there, and just working it along the bottom and kind of jumping it up off the bottom and letting it fall back down. Now, a lot of times when you pull back up, that's when you're going to feel that fish. But here's what I like to do when I'm fishing Lake of the Woods, and even doing it like this, you're still going to hook in some rocks. You'll feel a little tension on your line, and if you give it your rod and pull on your rod tip just a little bit, if it's a fish, most of the time they're going to give you a little bit of a head bob, but not always. But if it doesn't, more than likely it's going to be a rocks. And then what you want to do is drop your line back down and just kind of shake it a little bit. And because you've got those small jigs out there, most of the time it'll pop up out of those rocks. Make sure you check your line for any fragments on that line, because remember, when you're fishing the rocks like this, your line can get fragmented. So boy, if you catch a fish, of course you always want to make sure you check your line. But even if you don't, if you haven't caught a fish for a while and you're pitching these jigs out like we're doing today, make sure you run your fingers up and down that line to check it to make sure there's not any fragments in there. Now also, what has been working today has been these Beardsley power bait leeches. And the nice thing about the Beardsley power baits is that you can catch more than one or two fish off them most of the time. They stay on your hook a lot better. What we're using today is actually impregnated with salt, which is a natural attractant for just about all kinds of game fish. And they are so real looking that when you pitch them out there, they really do. They flutter just like a real leech does. The nice thing, though, about using the plastic on there like this Beardsley power bait leech is that it actually slows that jig down a little bit. So when you pitch it out there, instead of it falling right down to the bottom real quickly, with that plastic power bait on there, it actually goes down a lot slower, which makes it a lot more enticing to those fish. Plus, because there is some plastic in there, it makes it a little bit buoyant. And by having a little bit buoyant in there, it also helps keep from getting that darn jig stuck into the crevices down there. So don't be afraid to use plastic baits. They've come a long way in the last 5 or 6 years, and the Beardsley power baits are, some of the best baits that you can buy out here when you're fishing for walleyes or just about any other kind of game fish for that matter. If you come to Lake of the Woods early in the year or later in the year, you definitely want to get some minnows with you, and you can buy those once you get across the border. You can't bring it in from the U.S. Now, for our trip today, middle of the summer like this, you don't really need to use minnows. Leeches work well, but I still like to have some type of minnow with just in case. And today we're using the minnow in a jar. You can buy them at your local sporting goods store, or you can also bring in your own frozen minnows. They don't work as well as a real live minnow, but if you get in a pinch, they'll work, no doubt about it.
Our little eye. A little cigar.
There are also other methods you can use when fishing walleyes on Lake of the Woods, and one of the most common approaches, especially if you're out there in that big open water area where you're fishing those big reefs and those sandy bar areas on the big part of the lake, is pulling hammered gold or hammered copper spinners with a leech or with a night crawler. It's proven just deadly on Lake of the Woods for some fantastic walleye fishing.
There's a little better one.
Stick around, folks. If you're hungry, we've got a shore lunch coming up just for you. Our Detroit Lakes Tourism Bureau photo of the week is from Lee Kinzinger of Detroit Lakes with his beautiful walleye out night fishing on Lake Mille Lacs. There's virtually no wind on the lake here today, which is almost unheard of on Lake of the Woods, which always can mean a tough walleye bite. But the one thing we got going today, even though we have calm winds, is an incredible algae bloom going here on the big lake where you can't even hardly see 2 or 3 inches down. And what that does is it cuts down on that light penetration. So even though we don't have a wind today, we're still catching some walleyes.
The bubble. Nice sauce. Nice sauger. Nice. big. Little guy. A little wally. Oh, a little sauger. Another sauger. Saugers normally run smaller than walleyes. See the blotches. No white tip.
Folks, one of the most enjoyable things about fishing after you've been out there all day long and you work up a big appetite, no doubt about it, is going in and having one of those great shore lunches. And boy, on Lake of the Woods with over 65,000 miles of shoreline and over 14,000 islands, believe me, there are plenty of spots to have a great shore lunch. Now, what we're using today, folks, and what we brought with us, it's pretty darn simple. Obviously, you can cook in an open fire, but it's a lot easier by bringing a portable propane stove like we did. Then, of course, you've got your oil to cook the fish in. You've got your some kind of a coating if you want to put on the fish. Then also, what I like to do is dip my fish into buttermilk, and then we have potatoes, sourdough bread, and then, of course, butter. And if you want any type of seasoning salt, you can bring that along too. Now, what we did, of course, first is, unless you like eating the fish whole, you got to fillet those fish. So fillet those fish out and then start up that grill. Once you get those fillets all cleaned up and ready to go, start up that grill, pour in some of their oil. I like to pour in about 2 to 3 inches of oil, just enough so it about halfway to 3/4 of the way covers up that fillet that you're putting in there. And the key here, folks, is making sure that oil gets nice and hot before you put that fillet in there. Then what you want to do is take your fillets, and what we've done is taken our coating and put it into a plastic bag, dip them in that buttermilk so they get nice and moist in that buttermilk, then throw them into that plastic bag with your coating and then shake it up real good so that all the fillet gets evenly coated. And then you take one of those fillets out, make sure that grease is nice and hot, and gently lay them into the pan, and they'll start sizzling right away. If they don't, then you know that your oil isn't too hot. And then just keep an eye on them. And when they start to get golden brown on the bottom, cook them a little bit longer, and then flip them over and do the same on the other side. How long will it take? Well, it depends, but anywhere from about 5 to 8 minutes per fillet should be plenty of time. And then we also diced up some potatoes and seasoned them to taste, and throw those in the other frying pan there. And I'll tell you what, folks, voila, you've got yourself a shore lunch that is fit for a king. Lake of the Woods, what an incredible fisheries, and not as far away as you think. Folks, please remember to practice selective harvesting. By doing so, we'll continue to have great fishing for years to come. I'm Dick Beardsley. Thanks for joining me today on the fishing scene. I'll see you out here on the water.